The day I realized someone had stolen my land didn't start with a phone call, or a letter, or a lawsuit. It started with the sound of children laughing where my forest used to be. I remember slowing down my truck, thinking maybe I'd taken a wrong turn. Maybe Google Maps had finally lost its mind because there was no way that the dirt road my grandfather used to drive his old Ford down every fall could suddenly have streetlights, sidewalks, and a row of pastel mailboxes like something out of a real estate brochure. But there it was, a stone sign carved with fancy letters I didn't recognize. Silver Creek Estates. Luxury living, it said. Luxury on my land. My name's Ryan Cole. I'm 46, divorced, 2 kids, civil engineer, drive a 10-year-old Tacoma that smells like coffee and old blueprints. I'm not flashy, I don't wear suits unless someone dies, and I don't start trouble. But that afternoon, standing at the edge of a gated entrance, watching a moving truck unload furniture on a property that had been in my family since 1973, something in me snapped real quiet. My grandfather, Henry Cole, bought that land for $7,000 cash after he got back from Vietnam. 50 acres of pine, creek water, deer trails, and silence. He logged some of it, left most of it alone, said land was like people. You take too much, and it never forgives you. When he passed, he left it to me with one note tucked into the deed. Don't let anyone push you off this ground. I hadn't been out there in almost 3 years. Work, divorce, kids in college, life, you know how it goes. But I paid the taxes. Every April. On time. Never missed one. I had the emails, the receipts, the boring adult proof that says I didn't forget. So when the security guard stepped in front of my truck and said, "Residents only," I actually laughed. I said, "Buddy, I am the resident." He looked at me like I just told him I was the tooth fairy. I held up my phone with the deed pulled up. He didn't even glance. Just shook his head and called someone on his radio. A minute later, a white Lexus rolled up, and out stepped a woman who looked like she'd never waited in line for anything in her life. Perfect hair, oversized sunglasses, heels that made no sense on gravel. She didn't look at me at first. Just asked the guard, "Is there a problem?" He nodded toward me. Claims he owns the development. That's when she finally turned and looked me up and down. Work boots, flannel, dust on my jeans. The whole mental calculation happened right there on her face. She smiled. Not a nice smile. The kind that's all teeth and no warmth. "Oh, honey," she said, "if you're looking for work, the construction crews are fully staffed." I said, "I'm not looking for work. I'm looking at my land." Her smile twitched. "I'm Miranda Hayes," she said, like it was supposed to mean something. "Managing partner of Silvercrest Development. This property was legally acquired. It was abandoned." I felt my stomach tighten. It was not abandoned. I pay taxes every year. She tilted her head. "Our attorneys say otherwise." I asked her how many homes were sold. She didn't even hesitate. "All of them. Pre-sold. Families move in next month." Then she did something that I didn't understand at the time, but I sure do now. She took out her phone and took a picture of my truck. "Just in case," she said sweetly, "you decide to come back and cause trouble." I stood there for a second, breathing in sawdust and diesel, listening to nail guns pop in the distance like punctuation marks. And I drove away. That night, I spread everything out on my kitchen table. Krumpau SD'd. Survey maps. Tax receipts. The note. I stared at it until midnight. That one line in his handwriting, shaky but firm. "Don't let anyone push you off this ground." The next morning, I called the number on the business card Miranda had flicked at me like it was contaminated. Her attorney's assistant answered. I gave my name. There was a pause. A longer one. She said, "Mr. Hayes anticipated your call. That should have told me everything." She offered me $15,000 if I'd sign a quitclaim deed by Friday. $15,000 for land worth close to $4 million. That wasn't an offer. That was an insult wrapped in legal paper. I said, "Tell him I'll see him in court." Then I hung up and sat there staring at the wall, realizing I had no idea what I was doing, and that the people on the other side absolutely did. That's when I called an old college buddy of mine, Aaron, who works land development in Wyoming. I told him what happened. He went quiet for a second and then said, "You need someone mean, not smart. Mean." He gave me a name, Evelyn Park. I met her 2 days later. 60-ish. Gray hair. Eyes like she could see lies before people finished telling them. Her office smelled like old books and coffee that had been reheated too many times. The kind of place where problems come to die. She listened, didn't interrupt, didn't react, just took notes. When I finished, she said, "Show me the taxes." I did. She flipped through them once, twice, then closed the folder and leaned back. "They're in trouble," she said. I felt something loosen in my chest. "So we shut it down? Stop construction?" She shook her head slowly. "No, we let them finish." You want me to let them build 90 houses on my land?" She nodded. "Because if you stop them now, you fight a developer. If you let them finish, you own a neighborhood." I didn't sleep that night, but I hired her the next morning. From that point on, I became a ghost. I drove by the site 3 times a week, parked on public roads, filmed, took pictures, logged dates, watched families walk through model homes with coffee in their hands and hope on their faces. And I hated Miranda Hayes for every single one of them. She saw me one afternoon and called the sheriff. Deputy showed up, ran my plates, warned me about harassment. I smiled and thanked him and kept filming. Then the letters started. Cease and desist. Trespass warnings. A photo of my truck circled in red marker. Evelyn laughed when she saw it. "They're documenting their own fraud," she said. "This is beautiful." It didn't feel beautiful. It felt like being hunted. And that was before Miranda decided to go public. One night, my daughter texted me, "Dad, why are people saying you're stalking families?" I opened Facebook for the first time in years and saw her post. My name, my face, my truck, accusations, comments, threats. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about land anymore. This was about crushing me. And they were just getting started. The thing nobody tells you about standing up to people with money is this: they don't argue, they don't debate, they don't even threaten at first. They just start quietly rearranging your life. At first it was small, subtle. A code enforcement notice taped to my door saying someone had reported illegal dumping on my property. Then a letter from the county about potential zoning violations on land I hadn't touched in years. Then an anonymous tip to my employer suggesting I was involved in ongoing legal instability and might be a liability on public projects. That one almost got me fired. My boss, Greg, called me into his office, closed the door, and sat down like he was about to tell me someone died. "Ryan," he said, "I know you, but the board got an email, and now legal wants me to ask questions I don't want to ask." I stared at the carpet and nodded, because what do you even say to that? He put me on paid leave, said it was temporary, said it was policy, said it wasn't personal. It was absolutely personal. Then the Facebook posts multiplied. Not just Miranda, neighbors, fake profiles, comments about me watching kids, about me lurking in the neighborhood. Someone posted my address. Someone else commented, "Pay him a visit." That was the night I slept with a baseball bat next to my bed and every light in the house on. My son called from his apartment in Fort Collins, voice tight, trying to sound calm. "Dad, a guy came into the restaurant today, asked about you, said he was doing a background check." That one made my hands go cold. I asked him what the guy looked like. Suit, clean cut, business card, private investigator. Evelyn was furious when I told her. "That's intimidation. That's witness tampering. That's a felony," she said, voice sharp. "They're panicking." I didn't feel like they were panicking. I felt like they were circling. Then came the IRS letter. Audit notice. 3 years. Random selection, it said. Evelyn didn't buy it for a second. "No one this unlucky is random," she said. "They're throwing everything at you. That means we're close." Close to what? I didn't know. I just knew I was exhausted. Tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. Tired of my bones. Tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of watching. People crossed the street when they saw me. Even my neighbor, Carol, who used to bring me zucchini from her garden, started locking her door when I walked past. That one hurt more than I expected. I kept going to the site, kept filming, kept logging. I watched families move in, watched kids ride bikes where I used to hunt squirrels with my grandpa, watched a couple plant a maple tree right on the ridge where Henry and I used to sit and drink coffee from a thermos in the fall. And every time, I had to remind myself they weren't the enemy. They were collateral damage. Miranda, on the other hand, she was enjoying herself. She'd wave when she saw me. Big, exaggerated waves. When she blew me a kiss. Another time she stood next to a group of residents and pointed at my truck, laughing, like I was the punchline to a joke they all understood. That was the day Evelyn called me and said, "We need to talk." I drove to her office and found her standing at the whiteboard, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled back, that look on her face that surgeons probably get before heart operations. "I have something," she said. She handed me a printed email. From Thomas Hayes to Miranda Hayes, subject, Ridgeview parcel. Risk assessment. It was dated 8 months before construction started. I read it once. Then again. He wrote that the land was not abandoned, that I was paying taxes, that adverse possession would fail in court, that the only way to make it work was to move fast, build faster, and hope I couldn't afford a fight. "We've done this before," he wrote. I felt sick. "They knew," I said quietly. Evelyn nodded. From the beginning, that was the moment something changed in me. The fear had burned off. What replaced it wasn't courage. It was clarity. They weren't mistaken. They weren't sloppy. They weren't confused. They were thieves. Evelyn leaned on the desk. "This makes it fraud. Criminal fraud. Pattern behavior. If we can prove this wasn't a one-off, this becomes federal." "How do we do that?" I asked. She smiled, and I swear it was the scariest smile I've ever seen. "We go fishing." The next 2 weeks, my life became a spreadsheet. Properties, LLCs, permits, court records. I dug through county databases like a raccoon in a dumpster. Turns out Miranda and her husband, Thomas, had half a dozen developments across 3 states, all with messy titles, elderly owners, disputed boundaries, or unlocatable heirs. Every single one had complaints filed against neighboring landowners. Every single one had aggressive build schedules. Every single one had quiet settlements. Pattern. I sent everything to Evelyn. She called me that night. "They're not developers," she said. "They're predators." Then the code enforcement officer called me. Said he wanted to meet. His name was Bill. Late 50s. Sunburned. Wore his county vest like it was a uniform he was tired of putting on. He walked the perimeter with me, clipboard in hand, shook his head the whole time. "Nothing here," he muttered. "No dumping. No violations. Clean as a whistle." He looked at me and lowered his voice. "Off the record, every Hayes project I've inspected, there were complaints filed against neighbors right before permits got approved. Every one. Same playbook." He gave me his card. "If you need a statement." I'm tired of this crap. That card felt heavier than it should have. The next escalation came on a Tuesday. I came home from the grocery store and my front door was open. Just open. I stood there for a long second, listening, heart in my throat. Then I backed up and called 911. Deputies cleared the house. Nothing missing. No miss. No forced entry. On my kitchen table, there was a piece of paper. 5 words. "Drop it or lose everything." Carol, bless her nosy little heart, knocked an hour later. "Saw a black SUV parked across the street earlier," she said. "Man in a suit went up your driveway. Seemed odd." I wrote the plate down. The plate traced back to a private investigation firm. Same one that visited my son. Evelyn went nuclear. Emergency motions. Police reports. Protective orders. Subpoenas. She was in her element. Then the real estate blog published the story. Luxury homes sold on disputed land. Buyers may lose everything. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Calls. Emails. Messages from strangers. One woman cried. Said she used her entire savings. 2 kids. Moved from California. "Please," she said, "are we going to lose our house?" I had no answer. That night, I sat in my truck in a parking lot and stared at the steering wheel until my eyes burned. This wasn't just my fight anymore. These people were trapped in the blast radius of someone else's greed. When I got home, Evelyn was waiting on my porch. She doesn't do that. She's not the type. "Channel 7 wants you," she said. "Investigative unit. They're doing a piece on predatory development. This is their wheelhouse." I didn't hesitate. "Do it." The interview was 2 hours. Lights. Camera. Questions. I told them everything. The land. The email. The harassment. The break-in. The families. The reporter, Diane Morales, listened like she was building something in her head, brick by brick. When she left, she said, "They threatened us already." I asked, "Will you still run it?" She smiled. "Now we definitely will." 2 days later, Miranda filed a motion to dismiss. At 4:58 p.m. on a Friday. Evelyn laughed when she saw the timestamp. Judges hate that, she said. That's panic. The hearing was set for Monday. We walked into the courthouse, and Miranda was sitting there like she owned the place. Perfect posture, perfect hair, smiling at people who wouldn't look back. Thomas sat beside her, gray at the temples. Expensive suit. That look men get when they think the world owes them something. The judge didn't waste time. Counsel, she said to Miranda's attorney, you filed a motion to dismiss 5 minutes before close of business. Explain. He stammered. Something about procedure. Technicalities. The judge turned to Evelyn. Ms. Park. Evelyn stood, and the air shifted. Your Honor, we're not here about adverse possession. We're here about fraud. She handed up the email. The judge read it. Her eyebrows lifted. Just a fraction. She looked at Thomas. Is this authentic? He didn't answer. His attorney whispered. He swallowed. Yes, he said. That was the sound of the ground cracking. The judge denied the motion. Issued a temporary restraining order. Stopped all sales. Warned Miranda directly. If I see one more act of harassment, one more attempt to intimidate this man, I will hold you in contempt, she said. Miranda didn't smile after that. Outside, reporters were waiting. Cameras. Questions. I didn't say a word. Evelyn leaned in and whispered, they're done. They just don't know it yet. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a beer I didn't drink, listening to the fridge hum, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. Not victory. Not peace. Just relief. But Evelyn texted me before bed. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start dismantling them. And that's when I realized this wasn't the end of the fight. It was the beginning of the reckoning. By the time the trial date was set, the story had a life of its own. Local news, then regional, then national blogs. People I hadn't talked to since high school were texting me links with subject lines like, is this you? And dude, you're everywhere. I didn't feel everywhere. I felt cornered. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched. Every car that slowed near my house made my chest tighten. I stopped going to the grocery store at night. I varied my routes. Slept light. Listened for footsteps that never came. Evelyn noticed. You're running on fumes, she said one afternoon, pushing a cup of coffee toward me like it was a medical prescription. But you're almost there. Don't break now. I nodded. Didn't trust my voice. The depositions started the following week. Thomas Hayes went first. Glass conference room, downtown. City skyline behind him like a postcard. He walked in confident, like this was another board meeting he'd talk his way through. His lawyers sat close, hand always hovering near his arm, ready to pull him back if he wandered. Evelyn was calm. Too calm. She started with basics. Name, position, company history, soft questions, easy rhythm. Then she slid the email across the table. Do you recognize this? He did. Did you write it? Yes. So you knew Mr. Cole was the legal owner before construction began. He hesitated. His lawyer leaned forward. Don't answer that. Evelyn didn't blink. The court ordered discovery. He answers. Thomas swallowed. Yes. There was. The room shifted. From that moment on, every question tightened the noose. Dates, permits, payments, title company conversations, donations to county officials. He contradicted himself 3 times in 20 minutes. Claimed he didn't recall conversations we had emails for. Tried to reframe the strategy as aggressive business. Evelyn let him talk. That's her thing. She lets people hang themselves with their own rope. By the end, his collar was damp. His jaw clenched. His confidence gone. When it was over, his attorney stayed behind. She looked at Evelyn and said quietly, he should settle. Evelyn smiled, small and sharp. He should have behaved. 2 days later, Miranda refused to testify. Fifth Amendment. That told us everything. The title company flipped the same afternoon. Their rep came in pale, shaking, clutching a folder like it might protect him. Admitted they'd been paid under the table to push approvals through. Gave us emails, bank transfers, voicemails. Evelyn leaned back in her chair when it was over and exhaled slow. There. Finished, she said. Now we just make it official. The night before trial, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch with the lights off, listening to the house settle, thinking about my grandfather, about how he used to sit on the tailgate of his truck and say, Most people quit right before the win. I wondered if he'd be proud or worried. The courthouse was chaos. News vans, cameras, people I didn't recognize, families from Silver Creek. Some looked angry, some scared, some hopeful. One woman held her little boy's hand so tight his fingers were white. I caught her eye. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just looked tired. So did I. Inside, Miranda sat like a statue. Perfect posture. No expression. Thomas stared at the table. His leg bounced under the desk. The judge entered, and it began. Evelyn's opening was quiet. No teatrix. No drama. Just facts. This case is about theft, she said. Not with masks or crowbars, but with paperwork and arrogance. She laid it out. The land, the email, the pattern, the harassment, the intimidation, the break-in, the false reports, the lies. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Thomas testified. It was brutal. Every question was a trap. Every answer either contradicted a document or exposed a motive. He tried to joke, tried to charm, tried to deflect. None of it worked. By the end, he looked small. Miranda didn't testify. Her lawyers wouldn't let her. That silence was louder than any confession. When closing arguments ended, the judge didn't take a recess. She leaned forward, fingers steepled, eyes sharp. I don't need 24 hours, she said. The room went still. She spoke for 10 minutes. 10 devastating, methodical minutes. Fraud, misrepresentation, harassment, conspiracy, pattern behavior, abuse of process. Then she looked directly at Miranda. This court does not exist to reward bullies with good lawyers. She ruled in my favor. On every count. Full title, damages, legal fees, referral for criminal prosecution. It was over. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Evelyn squeezed my arm. We did it, she whispered. Outside, the families gathered. The woman with the little boy was there. Tears in her eyes. Are we losing our home? She asked. I looked at Evelyn. She nodded. I turned back to the group. No, I said. You're not. There was a pause. Like the world holding its breath. You didn't steal anything. They did. You keep your homes. Someone gasped. Someone cried. Someone hugged a stranger. Miranda walked past us with her lawyers, eyes burning into me like lasers. I didn't look away. 2 weeks later, Thomas was indicted. Miranda took a plea deal. Their companies folded. Assets seized. Accounts frozen. The big house up on the hill went dark. I could have sold the neighborhood. Could have cashed out. Could have walked away with more money than I'd ever imagined. Instead, I called a meeting. All the families came. Some suspicious. Some hopeful. Some defensive. I stood in front of them, hands shaking, heart pounding. My grandfather believed land was about legacy, not leverage, I said. So here's the deal. I'm transferring ownership to a community trust. You pay what you already agreed to. No interest. No profit. Just fairness. The room went silent. Then it broke. Applause. Tears. People hugging. One man shook my hand like he was afraid I'd disappear. After that, things got quiet. The good kind. I moved out of the city. Built a small place on the north edge of the land. The part Grandpa never logged. The old pines. The creek. Some mornings I sit on the porch with coffee and listen to the wind in the trees, and it feels like he's there just out of sight pretending not to watch. My kids visit. My son grills. My daughter reads on the steps. The world feels smaller. Safer. Sometimes I drive past Silver Creek and see kids playing in yards that shouldn't have existed, and I think about how close it all came to going very wrong. And I wonder how many people didn't have the receipts, didn't have the lawyer, didn't have the luck. That's the part that sticks with me. Because this wasn't just about land. It was about power, about who gets to take and who gets told to accept it. So if you've ever dealt with an HOA that thought they owned you, or a developer who thought you were too small to fight back, or a neighbor who tried to bully you out of what was yours, I want to hear it. Drop your story in the comments. Tell me if you think I did the right thing, or if you would have taken the money and walked. Because I'll be honest, some days I still wonder. And if this story hit you, if it reminded you that regular people can still win, share it. Someone out there needs it. Just remember, keep your receipts. All of them.